The best garden in the street. Don't forget the sea salt.
Hi, Nigel Ruck here. Now, you all know I love my gardening, and we all know that sea salt is simply fantastic for keeping your garden healthy and looking great. But did you know this? Sea salt reduces transplant shock and dramatically increases a plant's survival rate when it's just been planted. It's like insurance for your plants. So when you're putting new plants in your garden, don't just water your plants, sea salt your plants.
Don't forget the sea salt.
We are absolutely thrilled to have a traditional Australian company like Seasol sponsoring us here at All the Dirt. Well, hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of All the Dirt. Hi, Darren.
Hi, Steve. It's fantastic to have the team back together.
Yay, it feels so normal. And you know what else is fantastic? It's finally spring.
Well, in Perth, we've had such a long winter.
Yeah.
It's been so wet. It's been one of our wettest winters ever, and we're just not used to it.
It's been amazing. It's like the old days. But I've got to tell you, I've actually really quite enjoyed this rain, and I don't know, I just love that soaking into the earth and know that everything's being recharged. Our beautiful underground aquifers being recharged and the soil's been given a good flush and clean, and I love it.
I do love it too. And the other thing is it means if you're not outside, because I'm not very keen on gardening when it's pouring with rain, it means you do some chores inside, like cleaning chores that you've put off, get done. So,
Good
it's all the
catch-up
part
time.
seasons, and now I've been, really keen to be back in the garden. I'm loving it even more.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited. And I've got to say, the garden's actually looking quite lovely and nice. But let's share some of our sort of bits and pieces and techniques and what we've been up to and what we're looking forward to doing as well over the next, coming season, I guess.
Now, if I'm going to start, I'm going to talk about the things that are perhaps not our favourite things in the garden at this time, and that's our pests.
Okay.
So in Perth, we've had trouble with chili thrips. So they're all around the country, chili thrips, just that last year we had lots of them came up. It was a real, we had a real explosion of them. So what I've been doing is with all the new growth, I've been trying to spray every 10 days with a neem oil. So I've got a big backpack. I fill it up. Actually, I don't fill it to the top, otherwise I stagger. So I half fill it. That's quite heavy enough. And then I drench spray everything. And I did a spray after I pruned them. I used neem instead of using a fungicide, or I'm not keen on using fungicides anymore since we've listened to all our fantastic soil episodes with our experts. So neem oil, and then when the new growth came, I sprayed, and then I did it again 10 days later. So I'm just keeping an eye on it, because if you don't control the chili thrips, you're going to be in, it's going to ruin your rose display, and there's no reason to grow rose bushes if you're not going to get good flowers.
Well, I was absolutely astounded looking at the roses here last season and just how devastated they were. I mean, beyond belief. They were so twisted and contorted. They actually looked like they'd been hit with glyphosate, with, that sort of incredible damage. And to hear you say that you were on the verge of, if you couldn't master this, that you would actually pull them out. What a devastating thing for growers.
It really. And the way it is, I don't want to have to keep spraying even with neem oil, which is not super toxic. I still don't want to have to be spraying all the time. I'm hoping to break the cycle so that we can go back to normal, because, really, we've got great climate in a lot of Australia. If you don't have the humidity and the dampness, you really don't have any problems with roses. And that's one of the beauties of growing them, is that they're really pretty well easy care other than the yearly prune. And I don't want things that, take up all my time. I mean, we've got to be out enjoying wildflowers and doing all sorts of other lovely things.
Of course.
So also in the garden, little caterpillars. Now, you can use things like Dipel or Success, even on your veggies, but I actually like to just pick them off.
Yeah.
They're easy to spot. Well, you normally spot them when you see a few leaves. So I go out in the mornings. I just like to check, see how things are going. And it's a good way to see, how well your garden is growing if you go out each day and have a look at it. And I just put them into a little bowl. And then, this is a sad bit, don't listen too hard if you don't like murder. I then stamp on them. But it's a quick death. But if I had chooks, you could take them to the chooks.
Well, I do go the next step further and use Dipel. And Yates have got it selling it as Nature's Way, and it's an organic product.
Yes,
and so safe to use. But I find it highly successful. I also use Success as well. Speaking of successful, which is another Yates product, it's not certified organic, but it's based on the same soil-borne bacteria. So very, very, very low toxicity.
It has a translaminar action. The Success, so it actually gets into the sap stream, so it lasts a lot longer, so it's more rain fast, because that's the trouble with Dipel.
Yep.
If you've got overhead watering or it rains, the product's gone.
Yeah, anyway, to stick to organic and to have a product that really, and in particular on things like the brassicas. So when we're talking about things like broccoli and cabbages and cauliflower and all that, but I just adore my broccoli. I've got one section of the veggie garden that's just all broccoli. I'm talking 24 plants of just pure sprouting broccoli.
But I know with your broccoli, you obviously eat it every night when it's in
Every
season,
night.
but then you blanch and freeze yours, so you've got it
Absolutely.
through the year.
Yeah, we do as well. So by about the end of October, I want to be out of broccoli. It's just too hard, whether it's aphids, caterpillars, a whole lot.
Definitely.
But as soon as September starts, those white butterflies start littering around again. And so that's when I use the Dipel. Once again, it's a soil-borne bacteria. It's a certified organic product, and it just makes growing brassicas early in spring and also late in autumn easy.
Now, I want to say that, of course, you're always right about veggie growing, but you've always said that it's all about giving them lots of food.
Yeah.
So I had an experiment. There wasn't a real experiment. What happened is I had a big container I'd mixed up some blood and bone and some chicken manure, and I went to put it all on my broccoli and all my leafy greens. And actually, I tripped a bit, and a whole big, huge pile went on one section, and I just sort of fluffed it out a bit. But I have to tell you, they were the biggest broccoli. The heads were so much bigger. So it just shows that sometimes more is better.
Well, especially when it comes to our veggies. The thing is, these are fast-growing plants. They really want to move. They've got a limited lifespan. They draw in large amounts of carbon dioxide. They really want to move, and they've got to offset that with nutrition. And I find that, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to say 95% of most home gardeners with their veggie patch do not feed it enough.
Yep.
If you put it into comparison to commercial growers. Now, commercial growers will use a mixture of products, but often they'll be using synthetic fertilizers. And when it comes to our beautiful veggies, I like to stick to the lovely organic-based fertilizers. So you're right, we're talking chicken manure, blood and bone, are my absolute go-tos, but of course any of the fish and seaweed-based fertilizers as well. But they must be fertilizers. They can't just be tonics. You've got to turn the bottle over, or whatever you're using, the packet over, and make sure it's got a minimum of around 6% nitrogen to get that foliage growth and to really get that nutrition into them. But keep it up to them.
Yep. And I've been growing them in wicking beds, and I'm still loving the wicking beds even through winter. Of course, I've got wicking beds so I can actually turn the vent around, or it's a pipe around, so that they don't get sodden so all the time when it's raining. So I've actually found it's so much better because I just don't have to keep an eye on them. I don't have to worry about the moisture.
Yeah. Great idea. Great way to go. Hey, look, while we're on pests, not the most brightest subject, but let's... I
don't know why I wanted to start off with the bad news.
But look, let's have a little talk about weeds, because at this time of year, we're coming out of winter and the weeds are thick in the garden. There's no doubt about that. And we've got to keep on top of them. Now, you sent me quite a controversial email yesterday.
I did. You and I, we have an email chain. We're always talking about what's happening latest with glyphosate and Monsanto and Roundup. I did send it to you yesterday.
Well, that was saying that they're looking at withdrawing glyphosate from the retail market in the United States as early as next year.
Well, they said Roundup. They didn't say glyphosate. They said Roundup, and it was Monsanto withdrawing Roundup. And I actually said to you, did that mean that all glyphosate was going to be withdrawn?
I look deeper into that article. It is that. It's glyphosate.
All glyphosate's going to be withdrawn. Okay.
So, which is quite a radical thing. It's going to stay available for commercial growers, and of course, commercial growers would just completely freak out if they didn't have access to it. The other thing that's always amazed me about glyphosate and commercial growing is that things like, and a lot of people might be unaware of this, but when we talk about GMOs, like genetically modified food groups, and in particular here in Australia, we grow GMO canola.
We do.
GMO canola is designed to be able to be sprayed with glyphosate and not die. So the idea is that as the seedlings are growing, the crop can be sprayed and it will kill off the weeds in between the canola. But because the canola's been genetically modified not to break down with the glyphosate, it keeps growing. And it seems strange to me why we'd want to spray our food plants with a weed killer. But it's, I'm not a farmer. I'm not a canola farmer.
Well, I spoke to Bill. Bill's my husband. For those of you just coming in, and we have a land care business, and so we speak to farmers all the time. And Bill talks to the farmers about what they do, and a lot of them use the GM canola to actually clean their fields up. So, say they've had a weed problem in an area, they'll sow the genetically modified canola because they know that they then can really hit it with the weed killer to get it clean. So I'm not saying that we should be using it, but that's one. It's become a tool in a farmer's arsenal to try and grow good crops.
Well, it's a tough gig out there as a farmer trying to survive. So, but anyway, I can see for the home gardener, obviously that will creep into Australia as well over the forthcoming years, that glyphosate will disappear off the shelf.
I have to say, the way Australia's moving, we'll be very old by then. I don't think it'll happen in a hurry because we seem to be very slow at taking things off the poisons off our shelves.
Well, we've seen a couple of alternative products come onto the market, these sort of more organic based weed killers. And I did notice that Seasol in their earth care range have also come out with these nonolithic
acids. But they're based on pelargonium, so they're based on pelargonium oil. So they're a synthetic form of pelargonium. Or we used to buy pelargonic acid.
Yeah.
But that's what they are. But they don't work for things like cooch.
This is the thing. So they really are. They're knockdowns. So great to be using around veggie gardens and backyards where you've got pets. They aren't going to take out the cooch and kikuyu because the glyphosate is a systemic herbicide which will kill off the roots and all. So the only answer that I can see at the moment is what a lot of organic growers use, and that's solarization.
I agree.
So that's where you're actually going to have to use black plastic or some sort of tarp or cover or whatever, where you actually cover that kikuyu or cooch, and often for an extended period. We're talking, 3 to 4 weeks. And
I think sometimes it even takes longer than 4 weeks. It depends on the time of the year too.
It does.
I think, in summertime, I think it's quicker. I'd be doing it for, a few months.
There's going to be a bit of experimenting required. And, and this is a path that we're going to have to look at going down. But anyway,
it'll be good for the environment, so, it's good. And the other thing is that home gardeners, not of course our listeners, home gardeners sometimes don't use things at recommended rates either. So, it'll be good for the environment because, if they've done a lot of testing, and basically glyphosate is in all our food chains now.
It's very true. I would recommend to people that are still using glyphosate to make sure, rather than taking a sort of a blasé approach to it, make sure you're wearing gloves. make sure you put on a mask and just treat it with caution.
Now, let me tell you the other things I do in spring, a bit more cheerful. And we clean all our paths down because I don't know about you, but they get all mossy.
Yeah.
So we actually use a high-pressure hose. And the other thing I like to do is wash my outdoor cushions. I know it's a gardening program, but I like my outdoor spaces to look attractive. And one of the easiest ways to do it is to buy some really bright outdoor cushions. So make sure that you buy them with the UV special fabric. If you are looking for nice fabric, you can actually find it online. There's a lot available. And those cushions will last for years and years, even in full sun then. But, they get a bit grubby sitting out on the veranda with all the winds blowing all the dust around. So I like to have bright colours. I like to have hot pinks and oranges, and it really adds a pop of colour even when there's nothing in flower.
And are you saying that you belt the cushions with a high-pressure cleaner as well?
No. They get washed in the thanks, Steve. They get washed in the washing machine. I take the covers off and put them in the washing machine, put them on the line, dry them and put them out again. It's another task to do, but, otherwise they get really grubby and, it's not, you don't want to be having your guests, getting dust from your dirty cushions.
Well, this is the time to be planting out there in the garden. When in the nursery industry, a huge amount of our turnover takes place. Probably 40% of our turnover takes place throughout September and October. So all the growers prepare and will grow sometimes for 12 months in advance to release plants in September, October. This is the time to go into a garden centre and you're going to see the very best of the best. Fruit trees have been incredibly popular, growing in popularity all the time. And I want to say, if I could only put 3 fruit trees in, I want to talk about the 3 that I would put in.
Okay, what would you put in?
Okay, so number 1, I think in almost every home, unless you've got a great neighbour and a tree hanging over your fence, you've got to put in a Eureka lemon.
Mm-hmm.
They are just pure gold. They do need to be pruned regularly, kept into a maintained shape, but I just adore our Eureka lemon. Every time I can go out there and pick lemons all year round. I love it. Right?
I have 2 lemons. I have a Eureka and I have a Maya lemon.
Yeah.
The Maya tends to fruit more all at once over winter. You get a huge amount and then sometimes you get a second crop. But I've got enough space for 2 lemons, so that's what I've got.
Okay. Well, this is if you've only got 3 fruit trees in the garden, right?
Okay.
Right. My second one is our Imperial Mandarin.
Oh, they're the best mandarins of the lot.
Look, if you've got kids, if you've got grandkids, if it's just for your own household vitamin C content to share with the neighbours, they're the most joyous plant and they are really easy to maintain. They're practical. Once again, they do have to be pruned. I prune citrus once a year. Always in spring, and it's a prune to shape and just to keep them managed because they start pushing out flowers throughout the spring, and the flowers they push out in spring are going to be your crop for next winter.
Yeah.
So really important to keep them fed, keep them pruned to a manageable shape. But a Eureka and an Imperial Mandarin, absolute tops. And I've got another absolute favourite that I just adore, our English mulberry.
They're slow. That's the only bad thing about them. And they take up a lot of space.
Well, the English mulberry, because it's slow, is manageable.
Right.
So once again, all the fruit trees, or many of the fruit trees, I know there's a lot of dwarf varieties out there and that sort of thing, but I like the standard ones, I've got to tell you.
Yep.
And the English mulberry is very manageable because of that sort of slower growth.
Yep, it is slow.
They fruit later in the season. So depending on where you are, they'll fruit sort of more around November, December. But the intensity of the flavour.
They are the best.
Unbelievable. And with each of these, Eureka, the Mandarin and the English mulberry, you have minimum pest problems. And minimum bird problems as well compared to many other sort of fruit trees that are out there. So if you only allowed 3 And look, let's face it, our backyards are getting smaller. Our front areas are smaller these days. And so 3 can be quite a luxury as far as fruit trees go. They're my favourite.
Now, when you were saying your favourite, see, we didn't talk about this beforehand. We just said that we'd talk about what we do in spring.
Yeah.
I was expecting that you were going to mention a passion fruit.
Well,
It's not a tree.
It's not a tree. And yes, we've got a sunshine special growing on the fence and it is prolific, right? But this is our beautiful fruit trees. And even the passion fruit gets well pruned and, well fed and under control.
But this is the time of the year. In spring, if your passion fruits are, they need a prune back once a year, once they get established. So this is the time to prune back your passion fruits and all of your tropical plants. So if you have a tropical garden, this is a great time to, things get a bit ratty over winter, I find. They can get a bit hungry over winter. They can yellow off a bit. So you've got to feed them up, give them a trim back, and then they'll bounce back as the weather warms up. Depending where you are around the country, they don't really like cold winters.
And don't be frightened if you have got stone fruit or, in fact, most trees at this time of year, citrus as well. I know they've resprouted, they've flowered and all that, but prune them to a manageable size. It's really, really important they don't get out of control. I quite like pruning at this time of year, even on the stone fruit, because they heal very quickly. The sap's flowing, it'll come over, they'll heal quickly and bring back into shape and push out new growth wherever you've pruned them. Can I talk about another favourite?
Of course you can. That's what we're here for.
Lawns.
Oh, yes, it's time for lawns.
It is. And if you're putting in a new lawn, I'd love to recommend that you just look at some of the new hybrid kikuyus. They sound, to talk about kikuyu in a home environment sounds a bit radical because, traditionally kikuyu's a tough gig. But I've got to tell you, I love these new hybrid kikuyus. We've used one called Kenda. Mm-hmm. And the internodal spacing is really tight. So it's a very, very tight. It doesn't run and go crazy. And it is so incredibly tough. Now, we did put some clay into the soil initially before we put the Kenda down. And and adding a little bit of clay into the soil.
You've got very sandy soils.
Yeah, we've got sandy soils. We're coastal, but it's made a brilliant, a difference to the amount of water that they require and also holding nutrition as well. So we only used around about 1 kilo per square metre and just dug that in before we put the roll-on lawn on top. But it's the most incredible lawn to the point where we barely ever water throughout summer and will still maintain, a lovely lush sort of green colour. It gets mowed probably around every 2 to 3 weeks, so very, very manageable. But a tough, easy, low maintenance, will grow in a semi-shaded area.
Is it as good in semi-shade as softleaf buffalo?
Probably not quite as good, but it's not bad. It actually looks really good, and we've got weeping peppermint trees, so we get a fair bit of shade under there. And some of the softleaf buffaloes do good, but I find them a bit harder to manage. This thing's just low care. Look, I'm a bit slack. I'll let a few weeds come up, and as long as it looks green, I'm not a lawn freak.
That whole manicured, like if you're really going to manicure your lawn, it is very time consuming, and I would rather grow something else or do something else than spend every hour manicuring. And I don't want to use poisons. I mean, I'd only use poisons on my lawn if I had bindi eye. If I had bindi, I would definitely put poison in because bindi's a nightmare, but I don't have any, and so that's not a problem. So yeah, I think that people spend too much time trying to get a bowling green look.
I do too. I just want it looking green, and that's good enough.
You want a place that you can do cartwheel on if you're into cartwheels, or you can go and have a bit of a picnic.
Wash down the dinghy, that sort of
Wash
stuff.
down the dinghy.
Yeah. And what about the veggie patch?
Well, it's a really exciting time. You and I were having a bit of a look beforehand, and we were saying all that the catalogues have come out from the wholesalers with all of the, the veggie seedlings are out there now, and we all get excited. So, of course, in spring, it's warmed up and it's time to put in the most popular homegrown vegetable of all, which is the tomato. So, Tommy, what sort of tomatoes seeds have you put in?
Well, we were talking a little bit earlier. We've started putting in all of our seedlings, Mortgage Lifter, Brandywine, the Tommy Toe, which is my absolute go-to.
I love
favourite.
Tommy Toe. That's my favourite.
We just get such fantastic results from that. The Black Russian is a really fantastic tomato as well.
I find the Black Russian lasts really well. I actually had mine growing all through winter. It still had fruit on there, so I just left it in. It was in a pot, so I didn't have to, it wasn't in the main veggie patch. But I think those Black Russians are much more cold tolerant.
They are. They'll creep right through into, further deep into the season. But what I'm really excited about is the fact that we can finally put in cucumbers, zucchinis, chilies, all the things that we just love to pick that are so easy to grow throughout, and especially in spring, more so than the very heat of summer. And it's just such a sheer joy to be able to get out there and get them into the garden.
I love the cherry tomatoes because they're always the first to fruit. I love them in the salads. I also love them baked. You get the cherry tomatoes, you cut them in half, and then I sprinkle on some thyme. And then if you want to make them extra sweet, I put on a tiny dusting of icing sugar. I've got one of those icing sugar containers where I can just easily dust it on the top, and then you put them under the grill. Oh, and a bit of salt. You've got to have a bit of salt too. That is so delicious, really delicious. It's my favourite way. And then I love them tossed with some fresh basil through pasta.
Sounds delicious. Yeah. Absolutely delicious.
So definitely. So I like the yellow cherries. I put a lot of those in last year and they were really fantastic. I love all the cherries. And I did grow some big ones. I did do a Brandywine last year. But this year I think I'm going to try one of the beef steak because I haven't got room to do, hundreds or even tens of varieties. So this year I'm going to try a beef steak, and they're a very tall grower. So you've got to make sure if you're growing these, check how tall you need to put your stakes in. And it's good to put your stakes in when you put them in the ground. And I'll often buy seedlings rather than growing everything from seed. It saves a bit of time. And if you're only putting a couple in, it's just as easy.
Hi gardeners, Charlie Allbone here. Water is the key to maintaining a healthy garden. That's why I use Rich Grow Easy Wet Soil Soaker. It lets the water in and keeps the roots hydrated. Easy Wet is easy to use on lawns, gardens, pots and edibles. And its new granulated formula creates the Rich Grow effect for greener lawns and stronger, healthier plants. Grab some today and grow you good things. Available at Bunnings Warehouse.
Rich Grow, a proud Australian-owned family company. One of the most important tips for everyone growing tomatoes out there is as they're growing up, and I agree, Darren, get those stakes in early as soon as you plant them into the garden, but is to keep the base leaves clear.
Yep.
So keep clearing the leaves, and what you're ultimately looking for is to have a 30 centimetre clearance between the ground and the first leaf, because splashes bacteria from the soil up onto the lower leaves, and then that bacteria creeps its way up into the tomatoes, and that's what causes so many of those leaf spot problems. If you can keep the leaves off the ground, it's going to be a sheer joy growing tomatoes compared to hard work.
What other plants at this time of the year do you really like? One I really love that you'll find all through your nurseries at this time of the year. Well, there's two, lavender and daisies.
Oh, yeah.
Like the lavender I love because a lot of them now, you get the little short ones, the Italian ones, but I love the more French style, which have long stems, because you can actually cut a little bunch of them for the house.
Yeah.
And often if you go and visit a friend, I'll cut a few stems of the lavender, and I've seen people get really elaborate and wind ribbon round it, but it's just a lovely little gift to take. You might just be popping over for coffee, and it's just lovely to take something like that with you, and they look great in the garden.
They're beautiful. Those Canary Island lavenders, like you say, with the big long spikes of flowers are really really just absolutely gorgeous, and you get months and months of flower out of them. I think the most important thing with the lavenders and the daisies, and I'm a huge daisy fan, as you know, that we grew them commercially for many, many years, and a lot of the new varieties as well. And the most important thing that you can do with daisies is make sure you prune them at the beginning of summer. And it's a real tough call because at the beginning of summer they're still in flower. You've already had sort of a great sort of 3 to 4 months of colour from them, and you're reluctant to prune the flower off and to prune them short, but it's very, very important, and it's the same with the lavender as well, to prune them by about half before it gets hot.
Yep.
You're going to cut your flower off. That doesn't matter. They'll sail through summer and then they'll bounce back into flower in autumn for you.
And if you leave it too late, they burn, don't they?
They do.
That new foliage, they really burn and go brown and they go backwards.
So what happens is that if you're pruning them any later than December, the foliage that's been sitting on the top, and you give them a hard prune, which they need certainly by January, February, because they look real daggy by then. If you prune them into any time in January or February, that you expose the stems underneath that have been shaded all that period, and they get subjected to sunburn, and then you'll lose the whole plant. This goes for lavender and daisies and a lot of the soft perennials, but those two varieties in particular, they'll burn, you'll lose them, you'll get so disappointed. That's why it's so important to prune them mid-December by about the latest, prune them back by half. They've got time to adjust before it gets too hot. They don't sunburn. They just put out a lovely bit of fresh flush of new growth that'll carry them through the summer, and then they'll burst into flower for you in autumn again.
They're really easy to grow from cuttings too. So if you, one thing I find about the daisies is they look good for a couple of years and then they get a bit woody, even if you cut them back. So take some cuttings and they grow super easy from just the tip cuttings in the warmer months.
Small tip cuttings.
Steve always says, it's always got to be smaller than 10 centimetres or less.
Ideally, because people tend to take great big cuttings and they think the bigger the cutting, the bigger the plant. It's not true, So.
And sometimes you can even root them in a glass of water.
Sure.
So that's, because I've often found I've had a little bunch in a little vase, a little bud vase, and you'll find you'll get often, if you cut a bit with a few leaves on it, sometimes you'll get them to strike with in your water, and then you can pop them in the ground or you can do them in a pot.
If you do them in a pot, standard potting mix is fine. If you add a bit of cocoa peat, that's great. But make sure you put the cuttings into a shaded area. They don't want to be in direct sunlight while they're establishing those roots. But you're right, they can have roots on them as quickly as sort of 10 to 14 days.
And also spring, you're going to see a lot of your beautiful Australian plants in flower. So, we're talking about, I've had Camellia Quallet Bells, which is, it's finished now, but that's a pretty amazing little plant. And you can buy grafted varieties and, they are just absolutely stunning.
I'm loving the kangaroo paw varieties that are out there. The hybridising that's been going on, it's been really clever breeding.
Yep.
And these roopaws in various sizes, in many different colours, they'll flower. Some of them will flower for a good 9 months of the year.
I have to tell you my favourite short one. My favourite small one is one called Pink Pearl.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
I really, really like that one. And my favourite tall one is Yellow Gem. And what I love about Yellow Gem is it has the yellow flowers, but it's got the red stems, and I just love that combination together. And I've got all of those kangaroo paws together in my garden, along with some scavollas.
So you got a bit abstract there with the cushions.
I did get a big abstract with the cushions. Yeah, but it's all part of the whole garden scene.
Of
Do you know
course.
what?
No, I like it. I'm happy.
For me, I don't know. It is. For me, it's all part of the outdoors. And if you make your outdoors more attractive, you spend more time out there. And where we've got cushions in a few places. Boy, you're going to think I'm an interior designer if I keep going on about cushions. But that's when we have our morning coffee. And, we sit out there when it's a nice day. Morning coffee, I've got the hanging baskets there. which I really like.
Using it as a lovely sort of colour statement. And all
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I am, and it just adds to it. But what are you going to be talking about?
I want to get abstract as well because I want to
Okay.
tell you about a new favourite garden to kitchen of ours.
That's not abstract. It's less abstract than cushions, let me assure you.
We're going to put this recipe up on the website, and but I'm into these Japanese pancakes, okonomiyaki.
You said it so well.
They are delicious, and especially carrot and cabbage ones.
Oh, carrot and cabbage.
Yes, and they are amazing. They are so easy to make, and to be able to just sort of grate up some carrot, dice up some beautiful cabbage or what. Look, you can actually go out into the garden and pick anything green and turn them into these gorgeous Japanese pancakes. So simple and easy to make. And we make a batch and freeze enough for another 2 meals. So when you make a batch of them, you normally make probably about 9 pancakes.
So you make the pancakes, you freeze the pancakes, and then you add the...
No, you make the whole lot. You blend it all in together. So you dice, you chop up all your greens from the garden. We use a lot of silver beet and parsley as well, so it depends on what's in season. If the cabbages are finished, we'll move over into the silver beet, right? And one of the things, one of our little luxuries when we're out shopping is that I love buying organic carrots.
$6 a kilo.
$6 a kilo. I mean, it's a lot more than $1 a kilo than you'll pay for standard, but to know that they're organic and, are grown to perfection, grown with love, I say, that's what our organic food's prepared. So we've always got plenty of carrots because I find them difficult to grow, I've got to tell you.
I don't grow carrots because I've only got a certain amount of space, and I don't grow carrots because if I want to be cheap, and I'm not as pure as you, I'll buy the $1 carrots. We eat a lot of carrots too. I love them as, dips, or if you're a bit hungry, you can just, grab a carrot. It's, good for you.
Well, we'll put the recipe up for our carrot and cabbage okonomiyaki, and I encourage listeners to give it a go because they're great. They're so easy to make. They're so healthy for you. You can put some in the freezer and just pull them out when you don't feel like cooking that night and still have a gorgeous healthy meal. And you can use heaps of produce from the garden into your beautiful Japanese pancakes.
Well, you've convinced me. I'm going to make some.
You're going to give it a try? Right. I want to cover a couple little things that Matthew Evans talked about on that with that incredible book of his, Soil.
Yeah, that was one of my favourite podcasts, definitely one of my favourite of all time. We had such a great conversation, didn't we?
He's put in so much energy and effort into that book. And as he said at the end of the podcast, he made that book, put all that energy in because he felt he had to.
Yep.
Because soil is just so important to us.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a couple of statistics in there that, I don't know, I'm still trying to get my head around.
Okay.
He was saying that in the United States, where he was referencing less than 1% of adolescents, less than 2% of males, and less than 3.5% of females. It says a bit about females, don't it?
Yeah.
More intelligent, eat better food, all that sort of stuff. I don't know if that's the goss, but that they're the numbers, very, very low figures, that eat the recommended daily requirement of fresh vegetables.
Yep.
That's not good enough.
No, it's not.
And what a lot of that is about can be put down to the way that our food is grown. So if it's grown without flavour, if it's picked too early, it's got to be grown so that it's delicious. And a lot of that deliciousness comes from the soil that it's grown in and the way that we nurture the soil that it's grown in. And this validates the reason why we should be growing a little bit more of our own food at home. Because if you are feeding that life in the soil is going out, finding all the beautiful minerals and nutrition and bringing it back into the plant and turning it into not just something healthy, but also something incredibly delicious.
Well, we've proved before, we've talked many times about how plants take up many different minerals, even the ones that they don't need to grow. I mean, they only need a handful to do well, and they do need some trace elements. But there are lots of things like gold and all sorts of things that they will absorb in the soil.
If it's there.
If it's there.
Yeah. Well, that story about the iodine as well, up in the Himalayas, where because the communities had gone over to just using synthetic fertilizer, iodine wasn't being absorbed. So the little village up there, even the children had these massive goiters growing on their throats. And so they went over, the doctor, Australian doctor who was over there, spoke to the Chinese government and said, I think you've got a nutritional deficiency problem here. And the government went over to iodized salt. Compulsory iodized salt too, because it plays a major role in children's IQ development, that sort of stuff. But, one of the incredible things that Matthew was talking about there was when you nurture the soil and you use these lovely natural organic fertilizers and you stay away from the herbicides and, like you mentioned earlier, Darren, stay away from the toxic fungicides and that type of thing as well. These fungal hyphae that attach themselves to the roots of our beautiful veggies will increase the reach of the root system by up to 2,000 times.
It's totally amazing. When you read the books, you take it in, you think 2,000 times. That's just totally amazing.
It's mind-blowing.
They attach to the roots, and you can often see the hyphae yourself. So you might be digging in your garden and you'll see the little white filaments. That's the hyphae. And isn't it amazing? You and I both do garden talkback, and people will say, "Oh, I've got this bad fungus in my soil. It's all white," and you go, "No, that's the good stuff." Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other thing you mentioned also was talking about biochar, because this is something that's sort of becoming more and more available out there. It's been commercially produced, and 1 gram of biochar, because the biochar is sort of it's like charcoal, but produced in a more intense environment. But because it's got like this honeycomb structure, 1 gram of biochar has got the storage capacity within it in this honeycomb structure equivalent to 2,000 square metres. That's half an acre.
It's just amazing. And so you just think, so every time you fertilise, I mean, I've got quite sandy soils, that fertiliser, some of it is going to disappear, it's going to leach down. Even though I do improve my soils with clay, it's going to leach down and disappear. But if you can put the biochar in, incorporate it into your soil, it's going to hold on to all those nutrients. You're not going to lose them. You're not going to have to fertilise as much, and it's better for the soil, better for the plants, better for all of us.
We're learning it and all the time, and I think that's the most important thing. This is a science that continues to evolve. And just one other thing I have to touch on that I just adored was when they found out that the microbes in the soil actually come up into the atmosphere, up into the air, and that they have when you ingest them, when you take them in, breathe them in, either, through your mouth or through your nose, that they increase the dopamine levels in the brain and they make you feel joyous and happy while you're working in the garden.
And we already knew that, because we know that, spending some time in the garden makes you feel happy. Even sitting outside, sitting on my benches with the coloured cushions,